everyone. This is Diane Rasmussen McCaddy with UK Column News. I'm happy to be talking today with Cathy Mudge of Protect and Teach. She is a founder member of this organization. And Cathy, I'd like to just pass it over to you immediately so that you can tell us a little bit about what you've set up with Protect and Teach.
Hello, Diane. Thanks for inviting us along. Yes, I've come as a representative for Protect and Teach. There's 5 women and 1 man, and we set up last year to look at schools and school policies and what was going on in schools. We were looking at particular issues that were going on with single-sex spaces for women, and I'd come across a particular LGBTQ group and actually found out it was going into a school. And I thought, well, what on earth are they doing in a school as a third party? And we decided to look at all the schools in Devon initially and pull up their school policies, look at their social media, try and find out what was happening. We then expanded it to Cornwall, and we carried on and did Dorset as well. We had a look at the school policies, and we found that in 70% of them, the Equality Act was incorrect. They'd added different sexes like intersex and gender instead of actually having the protected characteristics. We found that in 60% of schools, they'd actually added gender to various lessons. They were also implementing it sort of like in maths and stuff like that. They talk about gendered children as a maths example. And in 50% of schools, we found it in every single subject, and they actually promoted it at assemblies. It was just everywhere. So that was what we found. We actually think there's more of that going on. So we recorded everything, and we were published in the Telegraph with a story about what was going on in schools against government guidelines. And we sort of went from there, really. We set up Protect and Teach because we started to get inquiries from parents asking about their school or asking if we could help or sending us information. So we thought if we just set up this small group, we're independent, we're not funded by anybody. We actually have a centre that people can send information to. So that's where we started. And we've gone on from there because this is all absolutely massive, what's going on.
Thanks. It is absolutely massive. I've been doing a lot of research and reporting on this, and the more I find, the more shocked I am. I shouldn't be that way, but it just seems to get worse because there's so much of it. I know you said you're based in Devon and you're working in Cornwall. Are you working nationally throughout England, or do you have other people around the country?
Yes, we have. We've actually got a northern branch now based up in Darlington. That was because we got lots of inquiries from that area. Darlington is a particular hotspot for this. And we then actually got people contacting from Essex and Manchester, Birmingham. We've now linked in with Scotland. We're in touch with Scotland. I've started linking in with Wales. I've got contacts in Northern Ireland. And we're all of us little groups. I mean, I really don't think that people in the government, in the Labour government, understand that there are so many parents who are now getting together to discuss this and see what they can do to stop it. I think they just happily think we're all sailing along and everything's hunky-dory, and it's not.
Now, what I'll do is I'll put your contact details for your organization in the notes for this interview so that more parents can get in touch with you. I think this, with all of these things, it's about strength in numbers. And so one thing that I want to be able to do today with our interview is to encourage more parents, grandparents, anyone who's concerned about this to get in touch with you, because I do think that we can only be strong against the Labour government, and we know all about that and what they're doing to fight against it. And I was really happy that I was able to meet you when you came to one of our meetings for the Scottish Union for Education, which of course I'm a member of, and I really hope that there are many more people in England than there are in Scotland. So I'm really looking forward to see what you can do with the size of your population, and hopefully we can get enough people angry enough that they will start to fight against this as well. If that's okay with you, I'm assuming you do want to grow, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the other thing is that a lot of parents are told they're the only ones. So when they go to school and say, look, my child's come home with this book, or my child's told me that this has happened in the lesson, they're talked to as though they're foolish, really. And, there's nothing like that going on at all. One of the reasons that we have set up and that we support parents is that we will get one parent who thinks they're the only one in a school, and we can help them. We can write letters. We can contact the school. We can give them advice. We link in with other groups as well, like Transgender Trend, Don't Divide Us, which looks at critical race theory in schools, and various other groups as well. So we're all linking in with each other. It's a real network that's forming. It's great.
That's really good to hear. And as you know, as I'm a canceled librarian and a canceled academic, happy to be working in my new career now with UK Columns, that I am actually completely free to expose this as much as possible without worrying about losing my job like I did before. So I'm really happy to be able to encourage this as well. And with our platform at UK Column, we tend to expose as much as we possibly can. Truly a free speech platform, so we can do these things without getting censored. We want the opposite, actually. So what I've got here is I've got a lot of examples, some that you've sent me and some that I've got for myself. And so maybe what I'll do is we can go through some examples so that people know that we're not just kind of making up these things in our head. I think that sometimes people need to hear from these examples, as you and I have discussed, and with the other colleagues in your group, we've discussed on calls, that there's a lot of power in calling it out by exposing the actual content, because it's easy to say, oh, these books are awful, but it's easy to dismiss us if we just say that without using examples. So what I'd like to do a lot in our time today is kind of highlight these examples, and then we can talk about them, and hopefully people will start to see what I'm talking about. I will start with one that I have brought to this discussion. The first one that I have, which is called Straight Expectations. This was just one that I saw because when I go out and I have some time, I just go into Waterstones or WH Smith and see what's on the shelves in the children's section or the young adult section. So Straight Expectations has rainbows on the front cover and the back cover. And it says, last night, Max asked Oliver out. This morning, he woke up straight. 17-year-old Max might be out and proud, but he's usually too busy checking his nail polish to check his privilege. Okay. So when he says he wishes he could have the easy life straight kids enjoy, Max gets more than he bargained for. He wakes up to find his wishes come true. Not only have his feelings for boys vanished, so has his lifelong best friend, Dean. With his world turned upside down and relationships in tatters, can Max find his way back to the life he took for granted? And maybe even with the heart of the guy he thought could never be his? What If It's Us meets One Last Stop, I think those are two other book titles, in this deliciously swoony queer romance. That's on the back cover. What's your reaction to that, Cathy?
Well, this is typical of the books that we're finding in school libraries, and obviously Waterstones and actually public libraries as well. So the whole point of this is they actually are trying to normalise LGBTQ with the very young children. So it's starting in junior school. So, I mean, that book is obviously, I'm hoping, just in a senior school. But you have to remember that a lot of senior schools actually have library days where junior schools will go in from the age of 9. And one of the reasons they go in is that they can go and use the library at the senior school. So you are actually looking at children 9 and 10 will be able to access this book. All the books we find are always coloured with rainbows. They're absolutely inundated with them. They're almost, I mean, if you ask a child, a very young child, they love rainbows. They love drawing rainbows. There's a reason why it's been particularly chosen, I think, for the people who write these books. This has been given to an 11-year-old. So an 11-year-old will go into the library. There will be a special, particularly this month, Pride Month. There'll be a display of books there. They'll all be brightly coloured. The child will pick one. They'll come home. Now, can you remind me again, what was the title of that book?
Straight Expectations. Charles Dickens would be turning in his grave right now.
They're going to get rid of the original, aren't they, from schools? So your
Yes.
child comes back from school and you say, oh, what's happening? What's your homework? And they say, oh, I've got this book from school, Mum, Great Expectations. I'm just going to go up and I've got to read it. This is going to be part of a work group as well. So that this will be on a list of books that a child be expected to read and tick off. So they'll obviously be reading this totally unsupervised, not perhaps understanding a lot of it, maybe becoming curious at a time when they really probably wouldn't have had any idea about a lot of this. And I just feel that if a parent knew, if this book came home with a big warning beacon on it and said, right, your child's brought home this book to read on their own, you'd be immediately, right, let's have a look, let's see what's in this. And a parent wouldn't.
Yeah, speaking of rainbows, this is one example that you sent me. This is from Richard Lander's school, covered in flags. It looks like I guess it's a Facebook post. Rainbow flags all over. Our LGBTQ plus students are putting on assemblies to celebrate LGBTQ plus History Month all this week. So we've now have additional months because I think it's June was traditionally Pride Month, and now February is LGBTQ plus History Month. And it explains why it is important. Today, LGBT plus people in the UK are able to live more openly than ever before. It is legal for them to openly identify as LGBT, get married, have babies, have families. I don't know about babies, sorry. Have families, compete in sports, access healthcare, access careers such as politicians, be served in establishments like restaurants and hotels. Now, Cathy, I've only lived in the UK for 10 years. Um, can you tell me, has there ever been a time in the past when LGBT people could not go into a restaurant and have a meal?
No, there hasn't. And the whole point of this is we're not against LGBT at all. What we're saying is that really there's a sort of a different type of situation now. So we have lesbians and gays, and a lot of the groups that we're now finding in schools dealt with lesbian and gay problems. So they dealt with their rights, housing, violence against them, or whatever. And I had no problem with that at all. But now this TQ has come, TQ plus, and nobody knows what the plus is for, has been added to the lesbian and gay group. And the groups that you mentioned are now coming in to promote transgender ideology. That's what it is. Now, you mentioned Richard Lander's School. Richard Lander's School is one of the groups we've been investigating called the Intercom Trust. So the Intercom Trust get about 670,000 a year, and a lot of that comes from government grants, it comes from the lottery, it comes from a lot of other very unusual groups that supply money every year. We now know that Stonewall's been involved heavily. Stonewall has a program on how to introduce LGBTQ, remember it's that long word, into junior schools and senior schools with things that teachers can download from their site telling them how they can introduce it. And this is how it starts. They gradually introduce it on like the Pride days or whatever. Now, what you're doing is you're exposing very young children to things that they have no idea is happening. So you're saying we've found it in schools as young as 5 that they talk to children about how they can be born in the wrong body, how they can change their body so they want to be a boy, how they can change and be a boy. I mean, this is a total lie to children. If a child is coming to school and they are saying that they don't feel right in their body for whatever reason, that is a sign that something is going on in their life that needs to be investigated. But instead, these groups would say you celebrate it. Now, we know that these groups in Richard Lander's School, they'll be holding lunchtime LGBTQ meetings. The whole point of a lunchtime meeting is that all children can go to them. They're totally unregulated because they're happening during the school lunchtime. They used to be set up. So, for example, you didn't like your school dinner. So you would have set up a group, you would have asked your teacher, you would have had a lunchtime meeting, a whole load of you would have got together to discuss the school menu and how it could be better. It would have been timed, it would have been supervised by a teacher, it would have had a set outcome, as in, this is what we're going to do with school dinners. At the end of that period of time, the children would go to the teacher and say, we've decided we want to have chips every day. Now, with the LGBT clubs that are going on, they run continuously. They send in, Intercom Trust has 2 people, one in Cornwall, one in Devon, and they get sent in to set up the lunchtime club. That lunchtime club will be open to 11 to 16-year-olds. There will be no record kept of who's going to those clubs, except possibly by the Intercom Trust. There'll be no ideas about what's going on. Sometimes they make rainbow badges or whatever. So there's no plans about what they're discussing. It's extremely rare for a teacher to actually go along and be involved. Sometimes they are, but if they are, it would probably turn out that they're actually probably quite an activist in this area anyway. So you imagine the child in the playground, possibly autistic. They even say in their own report that they have a high number of autistic children and the number is rising, and how can we make our LGBTQ group more welcoming to them. So you have a child that's not fitting in, maybe being bullied in the playground, and on a Wednesday lunchtime, they know that they can drop into this club. This club will have been publishing their stats about what's going on, and they say that they're full of trans and questioning children. Now, this is where I believe that the questioning children are actually lesbian and gay children who really don't want to admit that they're lesbian and gay because it's not cool. Being trans is cool. Being queer is cool. Being non-binary is cool. But actually being lesbian and gay is not. And, you know, what you're talking about really is you're talking about people who they're attracted to, lesbians and gays, and what they're attracted to. And the TQIA plus, I mean, it means nothing. What is that all about? It's actually really confusing for children. So, Richard Landers School, if we go back to them, they actually have pupils who are considered part of the queer club, and they actually are attached to a school for children with learning difficulties up to the age of 25. And they go and do their pride assemblies. So they'll actually send teenagers from the main school to the school with children with mental health issues and learning disabilities to talk to them about pride and the LGBTQ and being queer and everything like that. I think that that is actually really bad because obviously these children will look up to those teenagers and think, gosh, that's really good. That's what I want to be. I was born in the wrong body. You know, I want to self-identify out of this. I want to be like them. So that's really awful. And I don't know if you've got the picture, if you're going to put that one up, but there's two little boys sat down and they are under 11 looking at a poster all about pride. And I find that really sad, heartbreaking picture to see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, again, go back to the Born in the Wrong Body for young children as well. There's one book that you've put in here, and one that I've shown previously actually on UK Column, showing that young children may not even want to be the same, not only the same gender, but even a different species. So the whole idea of just being born the wrong way. So, for example, you know, I don't know what book this is from, but it says, your name, she says, is Mulan, and she sang a song that her own mother had sung to her long, long ago. Can you explain this one? I think the interesting part as well on that page is where it says, the baby's mother gave her child a bath and rocked them in her arms. So that must be the non-binary pronoun, right? Is that what you were trying to show with this one?
It's playing with words. This is what this is all about, playing with words. So getting rid of male and female. As you know, loads of teachers will now say they're not allowed to call their children boys and girls. Come on, boys and girls, come on back into the classroom. They, them is non-binary is actually very dangerous because what it's trying to do is it's trying to keep the child as a child. So they're not sexually developing into a boy or a girl. They're going to be in between. It's actually, I believe, very paedophiles are very fond of using non-binary as a way of playing with a child's mind, so that a child doesn't get any strong feelings either way and remains a child for them. Um, Non-binary as well is a way of not really committing to anything because it means nothing. It's not, you're not with sex at all. So it's very favoured by girls who actually are not happy with their changes in their body and stuff as they're getting to be teenagers. We know from research that there's a high level of possible previous sexual abuse. We also know there's a high level of children that are in care going down this route. So from a really young age, I mean, that book, as you know, is for a very small child. And you could read it as a grandparent. You might read that and not really realise, maybe you think the grammar's not quite right, but you actually don't realise that subliminal message that they're passing to that child. There's no such thing as sex. It's they, them. You're not boys, you're not girls. All of our fairy tales are all about big bad wolves and horrible things that can happen to children. It's sort of like a warning for very small children, beware of the wolf. What we're doing with these books is we're saying that wolf, that's your grandma, or your grandma is the wolf, so you're twisting the message totally. This is something called queer theory, which I'm sure you've probably covered before. Um, so it's breaking down barriers between children. So that book is taking away safety from children. All parents and grandparents would say that if their child gets lost, you'd say to them, go and find a woman and say that you're lost. You would say, go and find a policeman, but you don't see those on the street many times these days. Now you're saying, go and find someone who looks like a woman, because you're saying that a man can be a woman. And as we know from the case up in Scotland with the butcher, that is so dangerous for children, that they don't know the barriers. They also, if they don't have barriers, it means that men, as you know, are obviously more likely to be sexual predators anyway. So you're taking away that natural instinct that a child has, and you're telling them, don't worry about it. Everyone's the same. Children are the same. We know of schools where they've actually got very young children who are being identified as the opposite sex. We have one case which has traumatized girls, that they had a boy who was dressed as a girl until one day in the toilet, and they were about 6 or 7, they realized he was a boy. And one little girl, it really affected her mentally, that she'd been playing with this, what she thought was a girl, and it was her friend, and it turned out to be a boy. That's the sort of damage that's being done.
Yeah, there's a photo in here that I took in the bookshop at the British Library in London. Book is called Gender Swapped Fairy Tales by Carrie Franzman and Jonathan Plackett. I didn't take a look at the book, but I did take a picture of the book cover when I was in the bookshop, because I actually see these things seen it all over the British Library, all these different kinds of materials. You have another slide in here. If there was a boy saying that they wanted to wear girls' clothing, I believe it was.
Yes, this links in with the BBC. And as you know, at the moment, they have Waterloo Road, which is the school programme about children at school. And they have a
Mhm.
boy in there going into the changing room. This is the normalising of it by mainstream media. And the girls are all out playing netball or whatever. And he's in the changing room sniffing all their clothes and stroking all their clothes. And, you know, it's really, really an awful scene. This is for children, will be watching this from a very young age. And then the girls all come in and berate him. And then, of course, it turns out that actually he's really just a nice guy. He was really born a woman inside. And, they all make up and he's accepted. And sadly, not by his grandmother with Alzheimer's, who can't recognise the fact that her grandson is now her granddaughter, which is the ultimate cruelty, I would have thought, for somebody who's got elderly and has got Alzheimer's, that they have to confirm that their grandchild has changed sex. But again, all of this, it's just making the fluidity of it all, breaking down the barriers and whatever. And as we know, girls playing in sports are disadvantaged in comparison to boys. But you're saying boys can play in girls' sports because inside they feel like a girl. And again, there is that big question. What you and I are both women. What does it feel like? you know, it's just it's just this is what we are, isn't it? It's not a feeling. Just things happen to us because we're women.
Yes, I'm just going to read from this one. It says identity. And this is obviously meant for children. You can tell by the style of the cartoon and the drawing. Hi, I'm Leo. When I was born, my biological sex was registered as female. My body has girl parts, but I feel like a boy. I use a boy's name, use male pronouns such as he and him, and when I choose clothes, I like to get them from the boys section.
This is how all these books are going. We've actually collected as many as we can ourselves. We get them secondhand and just read them. We've also have a look at summaries from other groups that are working in this area and summarising the books. Not only is transgender ideology in loads of them, and there are loads of them in schools, about 15 different titles in a school that we've come across. They also look at suicidal ideation, which I thought was supposed to be something that children aren't supposed to read in. And we've also, one of the books actually talks about suicide as well. If you go back to what's going on in the schools, you have the assemblies. So not only are the LGBT groups going into schools and telling schools how to run assemblies to make them LGBTQ positive, but they actually are supplying people from their group to do it. And they actually advertise for people under 25 to go in and do school assemblies. Now, what is it about a school assembly? I think it's very interesting that instead of having an older, mature headmistress or headmaster talk to you about the school and the policies and, you know, being kind to each other and stuff, you've actually got someone who has to be under 25 to go in and talk about it. Again, it's that thing of looking up to them. Again, it's the thing with the books is the stories there are leading them the children into things that they might not really be ready for mentally, definitely. If you also look at the fact that they are pushing an ideology where trans is a big part of the book. So very few of these are actually gay. A lot of them are trans. A lot of them have drag queens in as well, which again is BBC's favourite person. They do many stories on drag queens. From our point of view, we want to know who's funding all of this. So that's the next thing that we've done with the groups that we found. So we found 100 groups doing this in schools and youth clubs throughout the country. I mentioned them going in and doing lunchtime clubs, but they also do Saturday clubs in towns all the way around the country. So your child will be going to this club and they'll be told that on a Saturday morning, there's a club for them that they can go and drop into. So I remember, and I'm sure you do as a child, once you reach an age where your parents are quite happy that you can go into town on your own to meet your friends, they drop you off usually and arrange to pick you up another time or you catch the bus or whatever. And these clubs were for 11 to 25-year-olds and LGBTQ kids, so they could just turn up and drop in. Now, interestingly, since we started researching them and finding stuff, they have actually now said that an adult must accompany a child under 16, but they didn't used to say that. And they've now split their clubs. So they now do 11 to 11 till 16, sorry, 11 to 16, and then 17 to 25-year-olds. So they've actually got different age groups now. So they know it's wrong. They know they've been doing wrong. And they're now trying to pull things up, you know, and get things back on, get back. Well, covered up, I think, is part of it. I would say as well, when we look at schools again, when we looked a year ago, we found this stuff. We found hot school policies talking about breast binders, how teachers look after breast binders, saying things like children wearing a breast binder will actually find it very difficult to do sport and may become very breathless because their lungs can't expand, but it's much better for their mental health. And also things like school trips and which room, which tent a girl who says she's a boy can go into. And guess what? It's the boys' tent.
That reminds me of this information you sent me, which is from the Church of England around these gender terms. And this is from the Church of England. And I'll just read the terms without the definitions. I didn't know what some of these meant until I read this, actually. F2M, which is female to male, gender dysphoria, gender identity disorder, gender recognition certificate, M2F, which is male to female. Packing, that was a new one to me, where it's someone puts a female puts a prosthetic item into their pants to create a bulge. Transitioning, binding, which is what you were just discussing. And it actually does say here, this can be hot, uncomfortable, and restrictive, but very important to their psychological and emotional well-being. It might make certain PE difficult for them, lessons, but to participate in, sorry, this is hard to read, could sometimes lead to breathing difficulties, skeletal problems, and fainting. It's hard. I just really cannot believe this. How the churches have been captured as well, and you know, I mean, we could just go back to Justin Willoughby, and we don't really have to say much more than that. When I think about what might be the motivations behind some of what is going on, I will just leave that there. um, there was also as well. You mentioned drag, and so let's go to this drag advert from Outreach Youth is in Ipswich Drag Academy announcement. Are you 13 to 17 years? Are you ready to unleash your inner drag? Join for an exciting opportunity to learn all about the fabulous world of drag. We've teamed up with the amazing Ginny Tonics. So we've got someone with a alcohol themed name, and you are targeting children under 18 to bring you a series of free workshops focused on drag makeup, wigs, creating fabulous outfits, performing for a live audience. It's so hard to read these things. I mean, it has to be done, and I'm forcing myself to do it, but it's really, really difficult to get through and put this out there. If we go into some of the queer theory stuff as well, which you mentioned, I will put a link to this in the interview write up. There's Emily Drabinski is a past president of the American Library Association, which is by former association, which shares reciprocal accreditation with SILIP, which is the one here in the UK, which I was canceled out of actually for calling this stuff out. SILIP is Chartered Institute for Library and Information Professionals. I was called into formal disciplinary meeting because someone was offended that I was against certain things like this, and I spoke out, and I left the organization, the SILIP organization, because I said I'm not going to pay you money to belong to your organization if you are going to discipline me for sharing views and trying to create some sanity back into our profession. But anyways, they are all into these sorts of things, and they use these kinds of terms, intersectionality, wheel of power, wheel of privilege. So we are supposed to be, as as librarians, as educators, teaching these things about the wheel of power and the wheel of privilege, which really, and I agree with what Don't Divide Us, that the meaning of that organization itself, we should not be divided. But what this really does is divide us, because this wheel of power, wheel of privilege, has all these different identities, and what intersectionality means from this theoretical perspective, which Emily Drabinski wrote about in an article called Queering the Library. Literally, I think this was actually about 10 years ago when she wrote this article. The intersection of all of your different identities that make up your single identity, basically. And so the thing is that all of us have multiple things that describe us as people, but this is just my interpretation. Tell me if you see this differently, Cathy, is that certain identities, such as the TQ plus, tend to be prioritized in terms of importance over other people, including lesbians, gays, straight people. It seems like there's kind of a hierarchy of importance going on. And if you identify as the T or the Q or the plus, then you are somehow have a higher status within these activist groups than if it goes anywhere else. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would, absolutely. We see it in the schools itself. I mean, really, this is emotional abuse of the children that don't agree with it. We know from the parents that often the reason they contact us is their children are really upset by what has gone on at school. We know of one boy who, he was 12, his mother contacted us, and in the school itself, they decided to have a gender set class. So they had to go around the whole class, and every child there had to say their gender. So he didn't want to say it. So the teacher said, well, you've got to say it. Every child, every person's got a gender. You have to say what your gender is. And he said, well, I just don't want to say. I just don't want to say. And she said, you've got to tell everyone in the class. The class started laughing, and he burst into tears in front of his class and then ran out. Now that's emotional abuse, because firstly, he was not allowed to say, I don't believe in gender. He did keep saying, I'm just a boy. I'm just a boy. I mean, this is just really terrible. But you can't identify as a boy. So children in that class will have chosen a gender because it would have given them attention. We know from schools in Exeter, there's a group called Proud to Be. They've actually had on their website where they had a child who was brought up like the special holy child because they come in as trans. They were something like 7 years old. And they were brought up to the front of the assembly and talked about how they knew that they were born in the wrong body. What do the other children think when they see that? They think, gosh, that's the special one. And again, this is queer theory. Again, I mean, it's a form of communism, really. You break down everyone's barriers. So boys are not more important than girls because you don't have boys and girls. Well, who doesn't benefit most? It's bound to be women and girls because they're the weakest. They're the most vulnerable of that sex group anyway. So you've already put them in trouble. But also boys themselves. I mean, why did that boy get upset? Maybe, I mean, he was 12. Maybe he himself thought perhaps he isn't, straight. So maybe that put pressure on him that he wasn't ready for.
That just reminds me, can you share, obviously without any identifying information, the story that you shared about the parent who came into a school library and asked a question about some of the books?
We get stories all the time from parents who've actually gone in to see the school. We often find it's the mothers because usually the fathers are working and the mothers often maybe a part-time and can go in during school hours because this is another issue. You can't access anyone in the school like they can in America. You can go along to the parents' meeting and have your say. Now most parents' meetings are actually done on Zoom. I mean, so you're not even face to face with the teacher anymore to bring this up. But no, her daughter came home with Juno's book on This Book is Gay. And as homework, as you do, just sort of casually, oh, yes, I bought this book home, Mum. And luckily, she looked at it before the child read it. I don't know if you want to read a bit of that later. And
Yeah.
it's really, really shocking. Firstly, you've got to just look at the cover. There it is, all the rainbows, everything to attract the child. It was set up in a display in the school library, and they are told that they have to read a book by an LGBTQ author. Now, not a lesbian or gay author, but an LGBTQ author. So you're looking immediately at someone who's writing queer theory. And they have to do that and tick it off on their list of books they've read, like a book by a Black person, a book by a woman, so all this stuff. So she had the book and she went in to see the headmaster about it. And the headmaster had obviously never read the book because they don't. They arrive in their library, they get put in. I mean, we can maybe talk about how libraries set up, get books for their school. Sometimes these books are donated. I don't know if you realize you can actually go to an LGBTQ group and say, right, could you send 10 of these books by Juno Dawson to this school here down the corner? And they'll send it for free. You pay a donation to the group. And that school will receive 10 books and they'll be like, oh, this looks quite interesting. Let's put it on our shelves. No one's vetting that. Anyway, so she complained. The headmaster was actually very sympathetic. However, when it went higher up, the safeguarding lead for the trust actually thought the book was fine. So when you read that out, I think you'll be very interested to think what a grown man thinks is okay for an 11-year-old to read. Remember, this library is a big library, so 9-year-olds from the junior feeder schools are going into that school, and they are also having the ability to select a book and take that home to read as part of getting used to going up to secondary school. The whole thing turned against the parents who were actually considered the ones in the wrong, that they are the ones that are prejudiced, that they are the ones causing trouble. The librarian, who obviously knew that book was there and is possibly an activist, became very defensive. And of course, it goes into this thing that you have of victimhood and people being made to feel threatened because someone has actually challenged what they're doing. This is ongoing. The school, I believe, has realised the error of its ways and are now agreeing to work with the parents. So we're really pleased about that. We're obviously supporting the parents themselves, but the parents are doing all the work here. They're actually getting involved. They're actually looking at the library list because, again, as a parent, you should be able to say, can I see the list of books you have in your library and actually get a list? I mean, I've just FOI'd a school and asked for their library list, and they say they don't hold that information. I mean, really, they don't have any information about what books are in their library. I mean, that
Of
is
course
going
they
back, but well, exactly, that's an evasion. Yeah, so that's the situation that we've had. Now, what do we do? So, as a group, we can help. So, we can help support them. We can give them advice. We can look at what they've been given, and we can look at it from keeping children safe in education, the CAS report, Human Rights Act. There's all sorts of things out there that support parents and their children. However, this has been really undermined. The schools are now going to be the new parents. That's what they want. They're taking away a lot of power from parents in saying what their children can and cannot see. As you know, they can't take them out of sex educations. And that's another interview in itself, which we're not covering here because that's pretty horrendous what's going on there. So PHSE is the lesson that they have to go to as well. And it's the PHSE where they get this stuff, they get the books, they get the information, and then after it's over, the parents get to review it. So there's another parent I'd like to talk about, if that's okay.
Of
This was a
course.
father who actually found out about the PHSE by a group called Jigsaw. Jigsaw is in most groups. Now, he was told by his child, and we have other children as well who are 5 years old being taught, have been shown slides on men who say they're women, like Laverne Cox, and how awful their lives are, and what 5-year-olds should do to make these men's lives better. Just unbelievable. The school denied that, though. They said, no, there's no way it's in the slides or anything. In order to see those Jigsaw slides, because it's a business, they say they've got to protect their slides and everything, and it can't be seen by people in case it's copied. So it means that he had to go to the school with 2 teachers who showed him the slides that they said that he said his child was shown on a laptop. They lean over him and they just quickly press the fast forward button. So you just see the slides. Now you can actually select the slides that parent sees. So it's not it's not like a film where it runs through. So they just click on the slides they want that parent to see. The parents then send a summary of the slides. So it'll say, slide 1, this is about a boy who thinks is not happy with themselves and doesn't fit in. Whereas in fact, the father said, well, actually, he was told that he was born in the wrong body by the teacher. Now, you never see the teacher's notes. We have had some whistleblowers that have sent those, so that's interesting. So the teacher's notes will say more like, talk to the children about why they think that they might not be a boy or a girl. What makes them think that? What sort of thing do they do that makes them think that might not be a boy and a girl? I mean, to me, that's grooming. So you're saying to a child, so, Johnny, why do you think you might not be a boy? And he says, oh, well, I really like my sister's Barbie. It's my favorite toy. When I go home, I love doing her hair. That's interesting. So, maybe you are born in the wrong body. It's just incredible, really. So he's actually FOIing the school, trying to find out more information. Again, he's had it after the event, so he can't stop his son being told that or seeing that at all. He's having real difficulty trying to find out exactly what is going on and exactly what the school will do to prevent that happening. This is happening up in London. And again, the school know they're wrong because stuff starts disappearing. I mean, with the Jigsaw program, I don't know if you know, but they get a furry toy. Did you know that for their lessons? And the little furry
Very.
toy has badges stuck on it. You're giving a child a lovely fluffy toy. That's their toy for their Jigsaw session, while they're talked to about gender ideology, while they sit stroking a toy, which, as you know, if you want to work with children, particularly disturbed children, you give them pets, to play with during the time while you're talking to them. I mean, this is sort of, people know all this stuff. So they give them a fluffy toy and they've got to get the badge for this particular thing, which goes on the fluffy toy to know that they've discussed this part of the lesson. That's the sort of stuff you're talking about going on in schools. These are third parties. Why teachers can't do their own education is beyond me. These are third party groups, 100 of them throughout the country. The government is spending 42 million over 5 years funding these groups. With projects going into schools teaching gender ideology. That is a huge amount of money.
There's another one that I found just recently called Twinkle. Have you heard of this one?
We've heard of Twinkle, yeah.
Yeah, I showed some content from Twinkle yesterday on yesterday will be the 24th of February on UK Column News Extra, and everything that I found from them has EDI components to it as well as rainbows. Everything that I was looking at, and the one in particular that I showed yesterday on Extra was for the COVID Day of Reflection. Did you know that there's a COVID Day of Reflection on the 9th of March this year? So be sure to reflect on the 9th of March. Anyways, there was this EDI piece of propaganda for children, which was suggested for a curriculum lesson plan for the children to reflect, had a rainbow, and it had very diverse children pictured in the photo. It was all, all of it was just encapsulated to me in just this one slide. It was a PowerPoint slide that explained to children why they needed to reflect on the 9th of March. I would imagine that some of those children would have been young enough in 2020 that they might not even remember or understand what happened. But now they're being forced to reflect because Twinkle wrote it into the curriculum that they should. Going back to some of the work in the schools, you've got here some examples of some actual student work where you can see that it is having an effect on them. This one says, the instruction says, reception writing practice. I can write a simple sentence, and it's very young child's handwriting. He put on the hot pants and the vest. He put on the pink wig and cap. That is shocking. That is absolutely shocking. And there's another one that is for slightly older children, obviously. And these children were writing answers to some examples of cases of what to do when you're dating. Now, if dating had been in the school curriculum when I was growing up, I think my mother would have pulled me out of the school, honestly. But so this is where it's saying the sort of the prompt is, I've just started dating. It's not like I thought it would be. They're constantly hassling me for nudes and pushing me to go further than I'm ready for. Is this what it's supposed to be like? And then the other prompt below that is, some people are like that. Take no notice. It's always weird when you first start dating. You'll get used to it. And then the student wrote in, this is unhealthy because you shouldn't have to be hassled for nudes. Not appropriate advice. You should break up with them. They shouldn't force you to send nudes, especially if you don't want to. Now, I personally don't think anybody should be sending nudes. That's just my personal belief. People can do what they want with their own lives when they're over 18, but this is not something that children should be discussing. It's just, again, absolutely shocking. And there's another one here about, really like someone, but I've heard they weren't very nice to the last partner. They made their partner feel quite bad about themselves, and they haven't been the same since. Maybe it's just gossip. There's always lots of gossip when people split up. And anyway, every relationship is different, so just ignore it. Why not go out with them and find out what they are like for yourself? And then the response from the student is, if it has happened more than once, they are likely to do it again. However, if it was only once, it could have been a misunderstanding, but you should always be cautious if they start to treat you badly. Well, okay then. Some of these graphic novels, and another one is genderqueer, which is something that I have here as well in my own collection of these books. But it's amazing to me that they're able to get away with just having, drawings and cartoons of naked bodies where there's actually people on the bed, texting, it looks like texting dirty photographs, and then being in bed together. Genderqueer is another book that I would like people to get a hold of. I'll just put it up here on the screen so you can see the cover. It is a Stonewall Honor book from the American Library Association. So this is what I'm saying about the Library Association's working directly with Stonewall to push this agenda. It's got this sort of badge of honor on it, like it's a wonderful choice. And this person that wrote it uses the ear pronouns, I believe it is, made up pronouns, identifying as non-binary and asexual, and coming out to ear. So there's that language changing, fluidity of language, family and society, by addressing questions about gender identity, what it means, and how to think about it. The story also doubles as a much needed, useful, and touching guide. And okay, here's one. I'm going to hold this up to the camera. If hopefully everyone can see that. There is actual oral sex between two men being depicted on these pages, complete with describing text and actual graphic images. The other one here is This Book is Gay. which is the one that we were discussing earlier. And what I want to do for this one is I'm just going to read out some of the examples that were in the email that you sent me that had been highlighted as particular problems. There is a glossary of terms in This Book is Gay, and some of the ones that have been chosen on this particular page, again, words I had never heard of before in some cases. Rimming, licking the bot, scat, eating poop, scissor sisters, a sexual position for two women, or an early 2000s electropop band. Strap on, a sex toy worn on a belt. Sub, being the submissive partner during sex. Top, stroke active, being the partner who gives during sex. Vibrator, a vibrating sex toy. Water sports, stroke golden shower. Weeing on people in a way considered sexy. Poppers, slang term for amyl nitrate and aroma that gives a feeling of lightheadedness. So now we're encouraging other types of unhealthy behaviors there. Blowies, popping another dude's peen, P-E-N, in your mouth, or indeed popping yours in his. There is only one hard and fast rule when it comes to blowies. Watch the teeth. Lips and tongue, yes. Teeth, no. Letting a guy cum in your mouth is a safe sex no-no. Bumming, I don't think we have to describe that. Straight men like stuff up their bums just as much as gay ones. Why? It feels amazing. It's just, it's just, again, I have no words for any of this, but this is what we need to be doing, is continuing to call this out. And what I worry about is, in some cases, if we were to do this on social media, as we've discussed, we might actually get censored for breaking obscenity laws. So we do have to be careful, but at the same time, we have to get it out there. I've also got a couple of examples of books here with the anti-racism agenda. This one is obviously meant for very young children. This is called What is Racism? It's the Lift the Flap book, so you know it's for very young children. So you can actually lift the flap to find out why race is a problem and why you should be an anti-racist activist when you're still young enough to use a book like a Lift the Flap book. Here's one, My Skin, Your Skin. Let's talk about race, racism, and empowerment. And you always see as well, which I always feel is a bit disrespectful to disabled people, that along with LGBTQ plus people and racist people, they also usually feature a child in a wheelchair, which is a completely different thing. I think we've given enough terrible examples for today, Cathy. Is there anything else that you want to add, or anything else that you would like to say in response to this topic that you want the public to know?
Yes, really what I'd like is for third-party groups in schools to be reviewed completely, and the amount of money that's being sent to letting them get into schools to be immediately stopped. That's going to save the government a lot of money for starters. I want schools to be transparent. I think parents should be able to see absolutely everything their child will be seeing before they see it. I think PHSE should be thrown in the bin. It's a load of rubbish. I think sex education parents can withdraw their children, but I think a lot of them have no idea of just how extensive it is now. But again, they would know if it was open. I can't understand why they believe that this is the way to go, to hide stuff from parents and expose children to this. We just want everything out in the open. Once it's out in the open, parents can challenge it, think changes can be made. But while it's being hidden and secret and not put on the agenda, not put on the school websites, then we've got big trouble. And we're getting children indoctrinated into thinking that they're born in the wrong body, which is a lie. It's going to cause huge mental health problems to them, and it's going to ruin their life if they carry on down this route, which Cass says is a possibility, that what happens in schools will actually lead to them going into hospitals and having these operations. That is just a terrible, terrible thing to do to children.
Absolutely, absolutely. Cathy, I just want to thank you and the others in Protect and Teach for all of your hard work. I'm really happy to hear that there are more and more parents out there on the ground around England starting to work on these problems and getting them out as quickly as possible. Because again, I say this with everything that we need to fight that our governments are doing to us. As Brian Garish would say, they're trying to cause breakdown and chaos in society. And I think this is another way that they're trying to do that. If you get to the children when they're young, before they know any better, so that it's harder to change people when they get to our age, right? So let's get them when they're young while we still can. So I just want to emphasize to the audience that this is just yet another example of the way that those above us are trying to break down society in general. And unfortunately, it seems to so far be successful. And this is why we have to work as quickly as possible to get this out before it goes any further. So thank you again. I would like to thank the audience, if you've made it this far, for sticking through what is a very difficult topic. It's been difficult for me to cover, but we have to do it. Let's all stay strong together. Don't forget to stay positive, keep smiling, because that's what they hate. And we will continue to follow this progression through what I hope will be will be a difficult fight, but it will be a fight that I hope we win, because I do believe that good always wins over evil. And let's keep that within ourselves and remember that. Again, this is Diane Rasmussen McCaddy with UK Column News. Thank you again, Cathy and Protect and Teach, for your time today. And I will see you again soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you.